Would you like to be able to create reports that show just how effectively your organization is operating, whether you're a small business or a nonprofit? Hi, I'm Mark from Valor Excel. Today I'd like to talk to you about using pivot tables for creating reports. Now, in our organizations, more often than not, when we talk about reporting, we're talking about financial reporting. That's obviously crucial, but it only tells part of the story. The other part is, how did we impact the people who actually came to us for goods or services? Now, that falls under the realm of outcome tracking, where we analyze the impact we had on the people we served. To do that, you need to capture a lot of data and then have a way to disseminate it. Now, one tool that you could use to do that is what's referred to as Customer Relationship Management Software, CRM. There are many different vendors who create CRM, and it has a wide variety of applications. One of the great things about it is that it's multi-layered and it's highly customizable. You can tweak it to match the specific needs of your organization. But the drawback is it can be very costly and have a really high learning curve. So it may not be a good fit for your organization right now. But the good news is, with something as humble as an Excel spreadsheet, you can still capture and disseminate data that will really give you a good perspective on how effectively your organization is operating. So let's jump right in and take a look at creating reporting from pivot tables. Now, when you talk about using a pivot table to create a report, you first have to talk about the spreadsheet that you're actually using to capture the data. So I've put a sample together for us to look at here. Now, my recommendation would be that you track an entire year's worth of data. That can be a fiscal year. It can be a calendar year, maybe for you, they run concurrently. But it's really good to have a solid 12 months worth of data to take a look at. You can really start to get a good understanding of the kind of outcomes that you're having with your clients. Here I'm just looking at something representing the first quarter of a year, and I've made this extremely basic, but I really urge you, when you develop a spreadsheet for your own outcome tracking, be as thorough and as detailed as you possibly can. And I'll tell you why. It's really good to have as much information as possible. I think when it comes to reporting, there's no such thing as too much information. You can always filter out what you don't need. It's much worse to find yourself in a situation where you didn't capture enough information and you're sitting there 3 months later trying to construct a narrative and you don't really have much to look at. Now, I've kept this bare bones today just for the sake of simplicity as we walk through the concepts, but I really do encourage you, think of any possible piece of data that's worth capturing, because you will certainly find a use for it. And there are so many different ways that you can manipulate data to take a look at different facets of your organization. Now, in the example I'm providing here, I concentrated on 3 primary areas: the client data, the type of interaction, and the services received. Now, on a broad level, when you're doing outcome tracking, I think it's good to think in terms of, what did this client come to the organization for? What did we provide to them? And if they came to us for something and we weren't able to provide it, why didn't we? That's so nuanced and so specific to each organization that you'll have to kind of explore how to develop that yourself in a way that really is relevant for the structure of your small business or your nonprofit. Here I've gone a little bit more simplified, and what we're looking at is the type of interaction that we had with the client, and then what type of services they actually got from us. Now, under the client data, I'm asking for the first initial, the last name, and the phone number. In a real-world scenario, I would strongly recommend that you get the first name, the email address, and any other identifier that could be useful for you. Now, if you're a nonprofit, there's a possibility that you have grant funding that might be very specific in terms of how those funds are dispersed. Maybe a grant is specifically targeted for a particular group. If that's the case, then you want to ask, whatever question will be relevant for showing how those groups are being served. Do you have programs that are specific for veterans, for single moms with kids? If so, make sure that there is a column for each one of those. And that will enable you to really get a comprehensive look at who you're serving. Now, in type of interaction, this is where I was envisioning how the organization actually worked with the client. So the three options I provided here are attended consultation, where they actually had a one-on-one meeting with a staff member, attended workshop, where they were in a live setting with maybe 50 other people, or attended webinar, where they only interacted with the company remotely. Under services received, I've listed 5 different services that this organization provides so that we can see what each client received: web design, YouTube channel, branding and marketing, social media, or operations analysis. Now you'll notice that in many of these cells there is a 1, and the purpose for that is to basically denote that the client attended the consultation, received operations analysis and web design. That is our input indicating that that particular cell applies to that client. If a cell is left blank, it just means that it's not applicable. Now, where this is first useful is in terms of data filtering. And the easiest thing that you can do is click and highlight the entire row of column headers, and then in the top toolbar under the Data tab, click on Filter, and Excel will apply a filter button to each one of these columns. So what's helpful here is that if you click on the arrow, you'll see that it's showing us every cell with a 1 and every cell that's blank. If we deselect, we can now select only cells that have a 1 in them. And now we see that these are the only clients who actually attended a consultation. And we can still see all of the corresponding other fields that are related to them. We can do the same thing over here under Services Received. We click here, deselect, and by selecting 1, we can see these are the only clients who received branding and marketing. Now, if you're just doing ad hoc reporting, this can be really useful, but it's a little cumbersome if you're trying to translate this data into a format for someone else to look at, particularly if they're outside of your organization. And that's where a pivot table is really, really helpful. So to set up a pivot table, you can click in any cell in your data, come up here in the top under Insert, and click on Pivot Table. Now, it's establishing a range basically of everything that we have here. And you can see there's a small dotted green line that is basically surrounding all of our data fields. Now, we also have the option of deciding where we want the pivot table to be placed. We could click on Existing Worksheet and insert it into a cell on this tab, but let's just go with the default for New Worksheet. And now down here at the bottom, it has created a new sheet for us, and this is where the data in our pivot table will be displayed. If you come over here on the right, you'll see under Pivot Table Fields, this is showing all of the column headers from our spreadsheet. And so we have the ability to select what we would like to have in that pivot table. Now, because I broke the data here into these 3 separate overall fields, I think it's beneficial to look at them individually. So let's look at type of interaction. If we come back over here to the pivot table fields, we have 3 possibilities: attended consultation, attended workshop, and attended webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and check each of those 3 because those are the ones that are specifically pertaining to the type of client interaction. And now, down here under rows, it has added all 3 of those. So we're starting to see the pivot table being constructed here, but it's a little disjointed. It's really kind of hard to tell what we're looking at. Well, what we can do is grab each one of those and drag over here into the values column. And as we do that, you'll see in the pivot table, it's now giving us the header and the associated count. Now, one other thing that we can do is take values, which is defaulted up here under columns, and if we drag that down into rows, this is a little bit easier to read. We can also highlight this and make it larger. We can bold it if we would like. And let's go ahead and stretch that out a little bit. And we can even highlight these cells, format them, and add a border. There we go, and we'll just center those. Now, what this is doing is this is automatically tabulating from the spreadsheet the count for each one of those. So if we come back over here on the spreadsheet itself, under attended consultation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clients attended a consultation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 attended a workshop, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 attended a webinar. And that is exactly what is being reflected here. Now, what will happen is, as the data here changes, so will what's being reflected here. And because the data in this particular pivot table is specific to type of interaction, let's go ahead and rename the worksheet tab to make it easier to identify. So right now we had 7 who attended a consultation. But let's say a little bit later on, one of these clients came back and actually had a personal meeting with one of the staff. So now there are 8 in this column. But if we come back over here to the pivot table, it's still only showing 7. That's because we need to refresh the data that's here. So if we come up here and click on data, now we can click on refresh all, and what happens is it has refreshed the data to now reflect that 8 clients attended a consultation. This is great because at a moment's notice, you can recalibrate and have accurate, up-to-date totals for whatever is reflected on the spreadsheet. Now let's do the same thing over here for the services received. We'll create a separate pivot table for that. So if we come up here to Insert and then select Pivot Table, again, it's selecting everything in our spreadsheet. We'll export it to a new worksheet. And let's go ahead and rename that worksheet Services Received. And now we can actually select the 5 services: web design, YouTube channel, branding and marketing, social media, and operations analysis. Again, that's what we have initially as the pivot table begins to build, and those have all been inserted into rows. But let's take them and move them over here to values. And you want to make sure that you're keeping them in the same sequence that they are on the spreadsheet, just to make sure that there's consistency in how the data is presented. And again, this is just a matter of preference, but we can take values and drag it over here into rows, and it'll be a little bit better presentation. We can highlight those, make them larger, bold them, and let's go ahead and extend these out a little bit. We'll highlight them, we'll format the cells, put an outline around them, and let's center those up there. And it's the same scenario. So we can see how many clients received each one of those services. If we come back to the outcome tracking, let's say that this particular client came back later on and they requested branding and marketing. Now here, we see that there were currently 4 clients who had received it. If we add another one, now we come back to services received. It's still reflecting 4 until we click on data, and then we go to refresh all. And now we see that branding and marketing is reflecting 5. So this is a very helpful way to compile the data that you have on the spreadsheet. But there's something else that you can do that is really useful here. I really believe, particularly when people outside of your organization want to see something related to your data, they'll usually respond best to something that is a visual representation rather than just a list of facts and figures. So it's very easy here, if you click on Insert, to actually create histograms or a pie chart. So for example, what we can do, we'll select all of this data. We can come up here, click, and let's select 2D column. Now what we can do is stretch this and make it a little bit bigger. And now we have a histogram that is showing the bars representing the different values for each one of those. That can be really useful if you have many different ones, but you might also find it useful to use a pie chart. And to do that, we simply highlight what we want to include, go under Insert, and we'll select a two-dimensional pie chart. Make that a little bit bigger here. Now, another nice thing that you can do is hover here to change the style. And I happen to like this one a lot. I think it's really useful because it's showing us the percentage. And so we can see that 42% of the clients attended a consultation. This is a great way to really have a visual overview of how things stack up against each other. You can take any of the histograms or the pie charts and incorporate them into other documents. Maybe you're putting together a PowerPoint presentation for a board meeting. Here you have an automatically created graphic. And it's a very, very handy way to translate what is otherwise not the easiest thing to read for someone not part of your organization into a format that is accessible and understandable, that you can present in a variety of settings. And it really does give you a way to reflect how much you are doing in your organization and how close to success you are in terms of fulfilling your mission and reaching the goals that you've established. I really recommend, as I said earlier, be as thorough as you can with this type of tracking. This is an extremely simple example. You can have a spreadsheet with hundreds of columns if that's necessary. Again, I think it's always better to err on the side of having seemingly too much information than having too little and suffering for it later on. So that's basically the approach that you take for outcome tracking and then using pivot tables to generate reporting. One of the great benefits of reports is that they can really help you to see whether or not you're fulfilling your organizational mission. But beyond that, how can you know if you're really on a healthy trajectory to grow and develop and become even more impactful in the years to come? If you click on the link in the description below this video, you can download a free PDF called Taking Your Organization's Temperature. It'll give you a real insight into how you're doing things and show whether or not the approach you take is inactive, reactive, or proactive. If this video was beneficial for you, would you please give us a like? And in the comments below, let me know what challenges you've faced in trying to report on how your organization functions. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to Valor Excel. We have new content on a regular basis, specifically tailored for small businesses and nonprofits. I really appreciate you joining me today. I invite you to come back for the next installment of Valor Excel. And remember, at Valor Excel, we're committed to helping you do smart work. I'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye for now.